She stood at the edge of the refugee line, clutching her children, eyes full of fear, but her voice steady. "Human, if you'll take us in, I swear, my children are obedient. I can cook, I can clean. I can be a good wife." She wasn't begging for charity. She was offering everything she had left. What the man did next would change not only her fate, but ripple through the stars. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the most powerful rebellion. The transport vessel groaned as it descended into Earth's atmosphere, its aging thrusters rattling with each shuddering gust of wind. Inside the ship's cargo hold, silent passengers clung to one another. Among them sat a woman whose violet-hued skin and silvery eyes set her apart from everyone else on board. Her name was Relia, a widow of the Taravani people, one of the thousands displaced by the Tenarch Wars. And nestled tightly against her were two children, her sons, barely old enough to understand the language of the humans who would decide their fate. This wasn't the life she'd imagined. Once, she'd been bonded to a gentle mate, raising her young in the blue-ringed valleys of Veloprime. But war tore everything apart. The Tenarch didn't spare civilians, and her mate had fallen defending their home. Their city, their lives, and their dignity, all had crumbled. She'd been rounded up with survivors, passed through protection centers, which were little more than glorified holding pens. And now they were being relocated. That word sounded so hopeful to the humans who used it. But to Relia, it was just another form of exile. Earth wasn't their promised sanctuary. It was a planet overwhelmed with survivors from a dozen broken civilizations. Rations were thin, housing overrun, and humans, despite their role as liberators, weren't always welcoming to outsiders. When the ship landed and its doors opened, the passengers were ushered out like livestock into a processing camp. Relia held her children's hands tightly, watching the sea of faces around her. Human officers in dull uniforms barked orders, scanning identities and allocating people to sectors. Some aliens wept. Others looked dazed, broken. But Relia's heart beat steadily. She couldn't afford to break, not for her sake, and certainly not for her boys. As night fell, the new arrivals were crammed into tents on the outskirts of the refugee sector. Relia sat awake, keeping her sons between her arms as they slept. She listened to the sounds outside, the hum of patrol drones, the distant muttering of officers, and the quiet sobs of those who had nothing left. Somewhere beyond the fences, normal life continued for the humans. Families dined together, laughed, slept in warm homes. She wondered what it must feel like to live without fear. The next morning, announcements echoed through the loudspeakers. Temporary housing requests will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Citizens are encouraged to volunteer for sponsorship programs. Sponsorship. That was the key word now. A human sponsor could take in a refugee family, giving them housing, food, and a path to rehabilitation. But sponsorships were rare, and most went to young laborers or skilled technicians, not widows with children. Still, she applied. She stood before the intake officer, her children quiet and clinging. "I can work," she said, in halting English. "I cook. I clean. I will learn." The officer barely looked up. "We'll process your request. Wait for assignment." And so she waited. Days turned into a week. The weather turned cold. Her sons fell ill with a cough that spread through the tents like wildfire. She cared for them, even when her own body ached, even when her strength failed her. Others around her gave up, left their children with nurses, wandered off, disappeared. But not Relia. Then, one day, a man arrived. He wore civilian clothes, a dark coat over a worn sweater, boots scuffed from long use. His face was unshaven, and a streak of gray touched his temples though he wasn't old. He walked through the camp, speaking with the officers, glancing at the refugees. Relia noticed how the others looked away, afraid of disappointment. But she didn't. When his gaze met hers, something happened, something silent but undeniable. He looked at her, then at the children, and his brows furrowed slightly. Not in pity. In thought. Later that evening, she was called to the administrative tent. "The sponsor has requested to meet with you," said the officer. She nodded, unsure what to feel. Hope? Fear? What if he changed his mind? Inside, the man waited. He stood when she entered. "I'm Elias," he said simply. "I'm a builder. Live on the outskirts. I signed up for sponsorship. They said I could choose." She inclined her head. "I am Relia. These are my sons." He studied her a moment. "You speak well." "I try." He hesitated, then spoke gently. "I didn't come here expecting anyone. But something told me to wait. And when I saw you..." He trailed off, awkward. She didn't need him to finish. Do you have others? She asked. No wife. No children. Just a quiet home. Too quiet sometimes. She looked at her boys, then back at him. I can work. I do not come to burden. You're not a burden, he said. You're a survivor. That's worth something. They left the next day. A shuttle took them out of the refugee zone, across the forests of the northern continent, and toward a quiet township nestled near the hills. Elias's home was modest, a small cottage of stone and wood, nestled beside a stream. It had only 2 rooms, but he promised to build more. I've got materials, he said. Just need hands to help. The boys were cautious at first, but warmth and real food softened their fears. Elias gave them toys, simple wooden carvings he'd made, and showed them how to whittle sticks. He wasn't loud or overly cheerful. He was just present. And for Relia, that was more than enough. She cleaned, cooked, tended the small garden. In time, she even learned how to use the tools in his shed. He taught her to hammer nails, to smooth wood, to plant vegetables suited to earth soil. Sometimes, they sat on the porch at dusk, watching the stars. You miss your home? He asked once. Every day, she replied. But here, my sons laugh again. That is more than I had dared to hope. Weeks passed. Then months. One morning, Elias entered the kitchen and found her cooking breakfast. The boys were outside chasing the farm animals. I got the approval, he said, holding up a data pad. You're officially registered as residents now. She turned, wiping her hands on her apron. Truly. He nodded. You're not refugees anymore. You're family. She stared at him for a long moment, and then tears slipped from her eyes. Not from sorrow. From a deep, humbling sense of gratitude. I want to repay you, she said softly. You already have. I mean more than chores. More than gratitude. Elias looked uncertain. Relia. She stepped forward. My mate is gone. But I am not broken. My heart still beats. And it beats for the one who gave me back my son's laughter. He said nothing. Just opened his arms. She stepped into them. The boys peeked through the window, saw their mother smiling, really smiling, and giggled before running off again into the yard. From chains to vows, Relia's journey had been one of pain and healing. But in this quiet home, in the embrace of a man who had chosen kindness over convenience, her future had begun to bloom once more. Rain struck the roof of the cabin like 1,000 soft taps, rhythmic and comforting. Inside, Kaelin sat by the fire, watching the orange light play over the sleeping form of Aelira. Weeks had passed since the day she stood outside his home, soaked and broken, whispering that she had nothing but love. And in those weeks, something had changed. Something inside him had unraveled and reshaped itself around her presence. She had brought very little with her, only a satchel, a few relics from her old life, and the twins Ira and Mael, who had slowly warmed to him. He remembered the first time Ira had laughed at one of his poorly timed jokes, how Mael had shyly handed him a hand-carved toy. These weren't just her children anymore. They were becoming his in spirit, if not yet in name. Kaelin hadn't planned this. He never saw himself as a father or a partner, or anything more than a lonely human eking out a life on a fringe world. He had chosen solitude after the war, after too much blood, too many goodbyes. He thought he had nothing left to give. But Aelira had gently disproven that, not with grand declarations or demands, but with steady glances, quiet strength, and warmth that outshone any sun. But peace never lingered for long in a galaxy stitched together by fragile treaties and simmering tensions. It was late when the first warning came. A coded transmission buzzed on Kaelin's emergency frequency. His old commander's voice cracked through the static, urgent, almost panicked. Kaelin. Orbital scans picked up an old Valari signal pinging from your coordinates. You've got company. Extraction in 30 if needed. Kaelin's heart froze. The Valari. Slavers. The same faction that had invaded Aelira's world, that had torn apart her home and family. The ones who had sold her into misery. He ran outside, eyes scanning the horizon. The rain had stopped, and in the eerie quiet of post-storm, a single speck blinked against the sky. A dropship. Headed straight for them. Aelira stepped outside, her instincts sharp. Her eyes met his, and though her face was calm, he could see the storm gathering behind her gaze. They found me, she whispered. No, Kaelin said, walking toward her. They found us. There's a difference now. She touched his face, her fingers trembling. You should have let me go the day I knocked on your door. I won't let them take your life because of mine. He grasped her hand. You didn't just walk into my life, Aelira. You rebuilt it. The twins were inside, frightened, clutching each other in the hallway. Kalen gathered them, secured them in the old shelter built under the cabin during wartime. His fingers moved with precision, weapon, shields, backup power. Muscle memory returned, bitter and familiar. By the time the Valari ship landed in the clearing, he stood at the door, his plasma rifle in hand. Aelira stood beside him, unarmed but not helpless. The lead slaver stepped down the ramp. He was tall, draped in ceremonial robes, skin a pale violet hue marred by war tattoos. He recognized Aelira instantly. You fled your fate, he said coldly. You were marked for disposal. We allowed you to vanish, and now you've drawn attention. I didn't flee, Aelira replied, voice hard. I survived. And I found someone who saw more than the chains you left me in. The Valari scoffed. Sentiment is a human disease. She's not going anywhere, Kalen growled, stepping forward. The slaver's smile thinned. You're outgunned, human. You have 30 seconds to surrender her, or your home burns. The old Kalen, the soldier, the tactician, rose from memory. He calculated distances, angles, potential outcomes. Then he remembered something far more powerful than tactics, what it meant to protect someone not out of duty, but love. He fired the first shot. Chaos exploded. The slaver's men scattered, returning fire. Plasma bolts lit up the trees, searing branches and soil. Kalen moved like a shadow, ducking behind cover, laying traps, using the terrain he knew better than anyone. Aelira pulled the twins deeper into the shelter, securing the blast doors as the earth shook around them. For minutes, or was it hours? The fight raged. Kalen took a hit to the shoulder, then another across the leg. But he didn't stop. Every time he stumbled, he remembered Aelira's voice the night she first whispered she loved him. Every time his vision blurred, he remembered the warmth of the twins sleeping by the fire. And when the final slaver fell, gurgling into the mud, Kalen dropped to one knee, chest heaving, the rifle slipping from his grasp. Aelira emerged slowly, cautiously. Her eyes met his, then the smoking wreckage around them. She ran to him, her fingers frantically checking his wounds. You idiot, she whispered. You beautiful, stubborn idiot. He laughed, weakly. Still think I'm worth loving? She kissed him then, fierce, unrelenting, the kind of kiss people write stories about. You're worth everything. They buried the bodies together. The soil soaked with blood and rain, but something else bloomed there too, resilience. Life. Weeks passed. The cabin was repaired. Kalen healed slowly, his limp now permanent, but he wore it like a badge. One evening, while the twins played by the stream, Aelira came to him with something wrapped in cloth. Inside was a ring. Simple, hand-carved from the wood of her homeworld's sacred trees. Somehow, she had kept it all this time. She knelt. Human, she said, smiling through tears, I may not have much. I may never be whole. But if you'll have me, I'll give you everything I am. Kalen knelt too, grimacing at the pain in his knee. He took her hands. You already have me. Their wedding wasn't grand. The twins were the flower bearers. The vows were whispered under starlight. But in that moment, beneath the cosmos that had taken so much from them, they chose love, flawed, enduring, defiant love. Years later, when their children asked how they met, Kalen would smile and say, she offered me nothing but her heart. And somehow, it was everything. And Aelira, always quiet, would simply add, he taught me I wasn't broken. Just waiting for the right hands to hold me. And that was the truth. That was love.